Let's start with our top story, which comes out of Afghanistan, where 24 people have been killed in an explosion near President Ashraf Ghani's election rally in Parwan province. Health officials say 31 others have been wounded in that blast at the Charikar city rally. Local hospital authorities say women and children are among the dead, and most victims seem to be civilians. A spokesman for the provincial governor, Wahida Shakar, says the blast was caused by an IED in a security vehicle. Another blast in Kabul's city center killed 6 people and wounded 14 others. The Taliban have claimed responsibility for both blasts. U.S. President Donald Trump says it looks like Iran was behind Saturday's attacks on Saudi oil facilities, but he says military retaliation for the drone strikes is not yet under consideration. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump said Iran's action would be met with a much bigger response. Trump said he will send Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Riyadh to discuss an appropriate reaction. Meanwhile, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg has expressed extreme concern over potential consequences of the attack. Iran, though, has dismissed the allegations, saying Saudi Arabia wants war to distract from its internal problems. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says he will never direct talks with the U.S., but could engage in multilateral discussions if Washington returns to the 2015 nuclear deal. Speaking to students in Tehran, Khamenei said the U.S. policy of maximum pressure on Iran will fail. Khamenei said the U.S. wants to impose its will on the Iranian people. Well, let's move on with the news now to German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who has called for a return to the 2015 nuclear deal to diffuse tensions in the Middle East. In a news conference with Jordan's King Abdullah, Merkel said the deal is a building block where the parties should return to curb Iran's nuclear activities. Merkel also expressed concern over the risks posed by Iran's ballistic missiles program and its engagement in Syria. She said Germany will always be in favor of de-escalation through a political process. Let's now go for a short break. We'll be back after that with the news. Thank you for staying with us, viewers. Now, international oil prices have declined after a market panic about Saudi supplies sent them surging 14% yesterday. Earlier, oil surged the most on record after the Saudi kingdom's 2 biggest oil plants were hit by drone attacks. The state-run producer Saudi Aramco lost about 5.7 million barrels a day of output after those attacks. The strikes cut Saudi Arabia's oil production by half. President Donald Trump has authorized the use of the U.S.'s emergency oil stockpile to ensure oil continues to flow. To discuss that further, we're now joining us Manocher Takin, who is joining us now from Tehran, although he's based originally in London. He's a business expert. Manocher, thank you for your time and for joining us here at Indus News. Now, Saturday's attacks, Manocher, have thrown Aramco's stock market float plans into fresh uncertainty. What steps do you think are needed to recover the losses?
Well, that is a technical question and understandable that the authorities in Saudi Aramco are saying, downplaying the story, and it's difficult to really guess if the damage is as high. The opposition, so to speak, that's in Yemen and other sources, they say the damage is much more extensive than acknowledged. So the answer to this question, of course, we don't know, but it will take some time. What could ameliorate the impact of this disruption is the amount of oil that Aramco has in its storages. This is normal operational inventory, like a grocer which keeps materials in the back store behind his shop and sells for his customers using that. So the amount of storage, of operational storage in Aramco is apparently between 150 to 200 million barrels, so roughly 3 weeks, 4 weeks. to compensate for this 5-6 million barrels per day consumption, or loss of production. So there is this little backup, and then beyond that, really beyond 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it depends if the Saudi Aramco engineers can get the whole operation back. Supposing they can get it back, then this will be a knee-jerk reaction by the market, and when they see the supply is coming back gradually, the prices should come down. But that is a big if, and I think the way the rumors are, and the people taking the speculative positions in the market, they usually think of the glass being half empty. They think more to the worst scenario. And I think the world is right to be worried about the worst and think of the worst scenario, because 5-6 million barrels per day out of 100 million barrels per day operation, production, and supply in the world is a huge quantity. A case like this before that happened in August 1990 when Saddam Hussein, Iraqi forces invaded Kuwait, and the world embargoed and didn't buy oil from Iraq and Kuwait. And at that time, something like 5 million barrels per day was cut off. And the price of oil went up. It was in August, September, and it lasted till January, February the following year after the world stopped. So the same thing, one could think that it will last at least several months before somehow the market realizes that the repairs can be done quickly, and then the prices will come down. But that is, of course, I repeat, is a technical question that we don't know, and then how the market will accept and realize this, whether the market will remain speculative or negative, or they will take the announcements of Aramco.
Okay, so Madam Chair, you've already mentioned about the surges, of course, of the oil prices and explained that for us. But I'm wondering, we've noticed, though, today that the prices actually declined a bit as well. What's the reason behind the fall, then, in the oil prices from that 14% high yesterday?
Well, that is the daily operation, instantaneous buying and selling, which is going all the time. Even without any accident like this occurring, there are other issues, news items, headlines, which make the price go up and down. And these are all really psychological reactions in the market. Even in this case, that is the actual physical supply in the production and export of oil in Saudi Arabia, really in the world market there is no disruption, because that amount of oil, the oil putting on put on tankers in the Persian Gulf, it will take about a month before it reaches, the Far East or in. So there is no physical shortage of oil, decreased supply to the refineries around the world. There is still plenty of oil. It is the anticipation. And so these anticipations, as in this case, they will now make the price go up before the actual shortage of oil in the refinery and consumption centers in Europe, America, and Japan, and the price went up. Those other issues also affect. For example, it might have been said that the market might have accepted that, okay, it is not as bad, and the price and the supply might be resumed. This little light in the end of the tunnel, this news makes the people a bit happier or a bit less worried, and so the price comes down. These are up and down oscillations, which are really based on the psychology of those who are actually buying and selling in the market behind the screen.
Okay. Very well, Madam Chair. We'll leave it there at that. But of course, we do appreciate you taking your time out to share your thoughts with us here at Indus News. Let's move on with the news for now. Russia has offered advanced weaponry to Saudi Arabia following those Saturday attacks on its oil installations. President Vladimir Putin says it is up to Riyadh to make what he called the wise decision to buy leading Russian air defense systems. At a press conference in Ankara, Putin pointed to the purchase of those Russian systems by Iran and Turkey as evidence of their effectiveness. He said the attacks on Saudi Arabia were not discussed during his talks on Syria with the presidents of Turkey and Iran. Putin said the Yemen conflict should be resolved through negotiations between all sides. Bahrain has signed an agreement with the United States to purchase its Patriot missile system. Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa made the announcement during a meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House. The Crown Prince says Bahrain wants to strengthen its trade ties with the U.S. The Patriot system is a long-range missile defense aimed at countering tactical ballistic missiles. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will soon meet the prime ministers of Pakistan and India to discuss tensions over Kashmir. Speaking to media in Washington, Trump said progress has been made to reduce tensions between the two countries. Trump's schedule suggests he will meet Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan later this month on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Last week, the U.S. president repeated his offer to mediate the Kashmir dispute between Pakistan and India. Relations between the South Asian neighbors have been tense since India illegally annexed occupied Kashmir on August 5th. Islamabad says the Kartarpur corridor for Indian Sikh pilgrims will open on November 9th. Pilgrims will be able to use the opening to attend celebrations marking the 550th anniversary of Guru Nanak, the religion's founder. Project Director Atif Majid says 76 immigration counters have been set up to issue visit visas to 5,000 Sikh pilgrims a day. Now, the corridor includes roadways, an 800-meter bridge over the Ravi River, and an immigration office. Well, Amnesty International has vowed to defy the Indian government's attempts to silence its criticism of human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. New Delhi has recently accused Amnesty India of violating foreign exchange regulations by receiving funds from its London-based parent organization. Amnesty International's Secretary General Kumi Naidu says the Modi administration has worked hard to stifle Amnesty's work in India. Criticizing the blackout in the valley, Naidu said it was a horrific act by the Indian government to cut off legitimate communication. Human Rights Watch has also called on India to release Kashmiris illegally arrested. 27 members of the U.S. Congress have so far voiced criticism over the 6-week crisis in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Elsewhere, Israelis are voting today to elect a new government. Snap elections were called after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu failed to cobble together a coalition after polls that took place in April. Locked in a tight race against Benny Gantz and with corruption charges hanging over him, Netanyahu is fighting for political survival. In a last-ditch bid to attract far-right votes, Netanyahu pledged to annex most of the Palestinian West Bank if re-elected. That pledge has been met with outrage from most Muslim countries. Former military chief Gantz had no previous political experience before declaring his candidacy in December. About 6.4 million Israeli voters are eligible to cast ballots for 120 seats in the Knesset. 31 parties are contesting today's elections. On to the UK now, where the Supreme Court is hearing petitions against the suspension of Parliament. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he will wait for the verdict before deciding whether to recall the body. In the emergency hearing, 11 of the court's 12 judges will consider the case. People held a protest outside the Supreme Court before the hearing. 2 politically charged actions have accused Prime Minister Johnson of breaking the law by proroguing the House of Commons. They say Johnson advised the Queen to disband Parliament in order to stifle moves to block a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October. Now, earlier, the London High Court agreed with the House of Commons suspension, but Scotland's Court of Appeal later ruled it illegal. Italy's far-right league has promised to unleash a battery of referendums to sink reforms planned by the new government. Disgruntled former Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini has denounced former coalition allies as traitors. Addressing thousands, Salvini promised to force referendums to undo planned legislation, including a change in the electoral law. Dubbing Prime Minister Conte a traitor, Salvini said he is acting against national interests to please France and Germany. Speaking in the small northern town of Pontida, the League leader suggested he has fallen foul of an EU plot. Referendums have to be held in Italy if at least 500,000 voters petition for one. Well, the EU has begun formal proceedings against Hungary for alleged breaches of the bloc's values and the rule of law. Budapest is accused of imposing restrictions on media, judges, academics, minorities, and rights groups. European ministers have met in Brussels for the first formal hearing on Hungary. That hearing is looking into the country for violating the rule of law known as an Article 7 investigation. The inquiry could lead to the suspension of Budapest's EU voting rights if other bloc members agree. Hungary has strongly rejected the accusations, calling them politically motivated. The European Parliament kick-started proceedings against the Central European country a year ago. Meanwhile, the European Parliament has endorsed the nomination of Christine Lagarde as the next president of the European Central Bank. She won the backing of 394 lawmakers, with 206 voting against and 49 abstaining in a secret ballot. Lagarde will be the first woman to hold the post. EU leaders will formalize her appointment at a summit in mid-October for an 8-year term. She was nominated by European governments to succeed Mario Draghi from the 1st of November as the head of the central bank. "26-year-old Nigerian woman Gloria dreamed of a better life. She left for Europe with 4 other women. Now, only 2 of the friends survived the torturous journey to Libya before becoming stranded. Find out what happened in this report.
Gloria once dreamed of an international career in fashion, but since her return from Libya to Benin City in Nigeria, she has been working as a seamstress on an assembly line in a tracksuit workshop, earning just $40 a month. Like many Nigerians who try to escape poverty, Gloria's journey to Europe was cut short in Libya.
That just had the belief that if I travel out, I'll be able to help the family. So when I came back, it's only him I told that look at what I went through. As I did, they asked me, I tell them, it's normal.
Like Gloria, 14,000 young Nigerians stuck in Libya have returned home since 2017, thanks to a United Nations programme. The state of Edo provides them with about €100 to get back on their feet. The state has also created training programmes to encourage reintegration.
It's a priority for us to give returnees and young people that could be potentially migrating jobs and opportunities that they are interested in, things that they would like to do, and not just things they would like to do. We don't want them just engaged. We want them to be able to see potential for growth.
In Nigeria, more than half of under 35s are unemployed. More than 60,000 Nigerians are still stranded in Libya. The vast majority are still in detention centres or in the hands of traffickers and local militias.
On to Washington, where teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg has received Amnesty International's Ambassador of Conscience Award for 2019. The award celebrates individuals and groups working to protect human rights. The 16-year-old Swede with Asperger's syndrome runs a movement called Fridays for Future to spread climate change awareness. She has been skipping school every Friday to protest outside the Swedish parliament, demanding action to tackle the climate crisis. That movement has now spread via social media to young people in other countries.
I think there is an awakening going on. Even though it is slow, the pace is picking up and the debate is shifting.
As I said earlier, international oil prices have declined after the market panicked about Saudi supplies sent them surging 14% yesterday. Global benchmark Brent futures are trading about 0.5% lower, while U.S. crude is down nearly 1%. European stock markets are flat as investors maintain funds in safe havens. London, Frankfurt, and Paris are practically unchanged ahead of a meeting of U.S. Federal Reserve policymakers. Earlier, the Shanghai Composite closed nearly 2% down on fears of a conflict between the U.S. and Iran. The Hang Seng Index was also 1.5% lower after Hong Kong's economic outlook was downgraded by Moody's. The Nikkei 225 in Tokyo was flat following a U.S. announcement that it has agreed to a trade deal with Japan. Let's now find out what the weather is like around the world. And you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin here at Indus.